Well, during his speech at the World Economic Forum, U.S. President Trump said he wouldn't use force to take Greenland. However, he also said only the U.S. can actually protect Greenland. To talk more about what this means for security in our Arctic and the Arctic in general and Canada's role in it, we're joined now by Ken Coates, a distinguished fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute. Ken, thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, delighted to be with you.
Your thoughts on the Arctic and what Trump had to say about it in his speech today. Is it realistic what he was talking about?
I'll be honest, it's really hard to find out what's realistic about what President Trump is saying these days. It's so inconsistent and so disconnected from sort of reality. You have an interesting situation where the United States basically had all the opportunities to do whatever it wanted in Greenland for decades, really going back to World War II. And they actually had many more armed forces bases there 25 years ago, and they closed a whole bunch of them down. So there's lots of different ways in which Greenland could be protected, and which the NATO alliance could be supported. Trying to figure out what Donald Trump's endgame is very, very difficult. All we know is that there's considerable sort of uncertainty. You could call it chaos if you wanted, but certain political uncertainty, and people are really struggling to make head or tails out of sort of what he actually has in mind.
Now, is Greenland that vital, and is our North then? I mean, it's essentially almost one and the same, or is this all about minerals and other things like that?
I think it's primarily about sort of minerals, but it's also about sort of big marks on the map. It's going back to almost the 19th century, a time when European countries were sort of carving up the world and carving up Africa and Asia and places like that and creating whole new countries and big colonies. You have a sense that there's some sort of territorial aspirations here that are really hard to figure out, to be honest. But I think the mineral parts are really important. But I think this is where the stuff with Canada sort of comes in. The Canadian Arctic is not Canada's hotspot. Canada's hotspot is actually the subarctic. There's good resources in the Arctic. Not what we thought there would be. We thought one time there'd be lots of oil and natural gas up there, and it turned out to be much smaller. There are some mineral deposits that are very expensive to get out of the ground, so you have to have really super high quality products like they have at Baffin Land and Edgeo Eagle and places like that. So it isn't so much the Arctic we should be talking about. We should be looking about the provincial north, the northern Manitoba, northern Ontario, northern Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta. The northern Saskatchewan has some of the largest uranium deposits in the world. So it's actually the subarctic that's actually should be our focus. And I think I always find the Arctic stuff to be a little bit of a distraction. It's sort of, pointing our directions way up north because we're kind of nostalgic about it, and we have very romantic notions about the Inuit and about the far north. We can do better in the Arctic for sure, but I think we have to really make some good sense out of what our defensive strategy is for all of Canada, including the sort of the 50% of the country that's in the subarctic. That's where our resource future actually rests.
Now, I mean, is there a realistic expectation we could actually defend our country against if the Americans chose to invade?
No. I mean, if they decided to invade, we would be very, very weak very quickly. I mean, we sort of have to admire what the Ukraine has done against Russia, but I'm not so sure we'd last a couple of weeks. And even the Prime Minister has indicated that he's concerned about that. But the question is, who are you defending against? If you're defending against the United States, we'd have to spend our entire GDP on defense and have half of our young people serving in the armed forces. That's not going to be likely and not going to happen at all. But can we protect it better? The answer is absolutely yes. We could have more Arctic submarines. We could have better sensor systems in the far north. We can not let the debate about airplanes and fighter jets be transformed almost overnight from a conversation about what would we need militarily, we've known for 20 years, into a conversation about Canadian industrial policy. Now let's bring in a different fighter, and maybe we'll get Saab to come over, and we'll get more industrial plants and get some more economic benefits out of it. That's a terrible thing to do. You have to defend the North with the best equipment you possibly can, to provide the right surveillance against any enemies. And I think over time the Americans will be less of a threat. We're never going to go back to sort of thinking of them as our best friends forever. But we also have to have much more control over what the Russians are doing in the far north, what the Chinese might be interested in doing, and protecting NATO interests. I mean, we should be looking at how we can defend Greenland should anything happen to Greenland. And I think there are more technological solutions than there are, sort of old style military boots on the ground kind of an approach. But in Canada so far, we haven't moved along that line very quickly. We've actually been talking about it for years, and we haven't done very much. So I'm still looking for a sign that we're actually going to do something different.
And I just want to ask: are you up north right now? I can see some brightness in the windows. It could be snow, but are you right up north right now?
I'm not. I'm actually down on the Vancouver Island, but I'm actually heading up north very shortly.
Okay.
And it's an interesting to go up there because you'll discover how completely undefended it is. We have no military presence outside of Yellowknife, and that's a massive amount of country, more than half of Canada's landscape, and almost no presence except the Canadian Arctic Rangers.
All right. I think everybody should take a trip up there. Ken, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Drive safe.
You're more than welcome. Take care.
Ken Coates is a distinguished fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute.